Hey everybody, it's Nate Tharian. Welcome to my pop-up podcast. In this episode, I am sitting down with Charlie Pascal of Pascal Advisory. Pascal Advisory is a legal advisory firm that helps startup companies. Correct me if I'm mistaken, Charlie. Work quite a bit with pre-seed, seed,
Yep.
Series A.
Yeah, pre-napkin, right on through. And as companies mature, I grow with them, and so basically, outside general counsel for early stage companies.
All right. So what I'll do here is just let you give the elevator pitch, give the 2-3 minute elevator pitch. Let everyone know what you do, who you're working with, how you're helping them out. Go for it.
Sure. So at Pascal Advisory, I work with startups, as I said, from pre-incorporation or even pre-team to kind of sketch out, discuss ideas about what entity to form, when to form, structure, stuff like that, whether they're going to need outside capital, because that'll factor into that conversation as well. And essentially help them build the team, build the board, and get through their initial funding, whether it's friends and family or up through venture capital, family office type stuff. My experience is mainly on the corporate side, which I would describe as most of the day-to-day stuff that a startup would need, whether it's a vendor contract, creating a stock plan, an option pool, making those grants to new team members. If there's some kind of a partnership opportunity with another company you want to collaborate with, so like JV or other collaborations, licensing, it's kind of the gamut. And when we get into stuff like nuanced tax issues, whether it's some cross-border thing or specific intellectual property, I have great folks in my network that are kind of around the same, cost, and I trust them, and can bring them in as needed, kind of on a contract basis to support the project, whatever it happens to be.
So you ran through quite a bit there. So you're running right through, I think you mentioned it, a napkin, to the napkin phase, right through.
Well, through an exit.
I was going to say through. Yeah. You're going right through an exit.
Yeah.
All right. So that does cover a lot of ground. Yeah. You're going right through from cradle. I want to say cradle to grave. That's a little morbid.
Sometimes,
but, it might go that way. Not so much that, but so much. You'll take them to the finish line.
Yeah, and if that finish line is a public offering, I would not handle that myself. Although I have nightmares about doing a couple IPOs or maybe handful when I was at some bigger law firms. And so I know what it's like. I know how to get them prepared, but that's like a full court. You really want to have a bigger firm. That's one of the things where I would just hand off to and kind of tee it up, make sure they're ready for, diligence and to how to work with the attorneys on their registration statement, the prospectus for the offering and stuff like that. But yeah, if it's an acquisition or a merger, certainly help them with that, and as I noted, bring in experts as needed.
So let's start with the napkin example, and maybe not so much the napkin, when they're a little further than the napkin, to the point that now they now need advisory services. They're going to be spinning up their company. They're going to be getting going. One thing that I get quite a bit is what are the first things that they should be doing? Now, understanding that there are things they should be doing, there are also things they should not be doing. So if you would, I want to ask you, what are 3 things that a pre-seed just getting the ball rolling, like the first 3 things that a company should be doing from a legal standpoint as a startup, what they should be, and 3 things they shouldn't?
Sure. So first and foremost, at that napkin or shortly after, a lot of founders I talk to say, well, once we get our product in MVP or, further down the line, then, maybe we can talk about incorporating. I generally advise startups you cannot incorporate too early, whether, and I say incorporate, whether it's an LLC or a corporation or some variation on those. It's relatively cheap to get organized, to get incorporated. And for several reasons that I can get into, in follow-up conversations if anyone wants to discuss. The earlier you set the company up, one, you now have that general corporate protection. God forbid, something happens and you make an early contract that, somehow goes sour, your personal assets are not going to be, up for grabs if there's some claim. More importantly, you're going to be able to issue yourself and your co-founders stock at the cheapest price possible. And as the company goes through even a moderate development of a product or raises a little bit of money, it gets harder to less defensible to justify like a par value issuance. Par value is the cheapest stock the company can issue. And in theory, when you're at that napkin or shortly after, you are going to lose that opportunity. Second thing is making sure all team members, including the founders, assign intellectual property rights to the company so that the company owns the ideas and the methods, whatever the IP is. When investors come in, they're going to want to make sure that they're investing in the company and it's the company that actually holds that intellectual property. If, each founder sort of has a personal stake in it and somebody ends up leaving, that can get very messy and sometimes can, kind of kill the company. So getting your stock issued, assigning IP to the company, and building the board, I think is something that people don't think about early enough. And
is that like the third point? Okay. Third point being the board. Okay.
It's never too early to bring in folks, and early on, it doesn't have to be, someone, you're not going to get, necessarily Elon Musk or somebody to put on your board deck, but it's the value that someone who's been through it before, maybe they're in a similar industry, maybe they're in the same industry, but they have, the experience to help guide you together with your other advisors, whether it be legal or, tax or accounting. And it's not a lock-in forever thing. The idea is you and your co-founders, obviously, you own the whole company early on, you're making most of the decisions, but having, someone who's a little bit more on the outside, not on as much in the weeds of, product development, for example, and kind of see that bigger picture and say, well, have you thought about this? Or, they can make intros for you. We're not even necessarily to the point where you're raising money, but, people, advisors and board members can help with that as well.
So those are three things they should be doing. Take a look early. What are three things they should not be doing? Three things that they could just step on the landmine and, make their life a whole lot more difficult than it would need to be. What are three things that they should not do?
Well, I guess, kind of starting with the inverse of the positives, I said, if you don't assign that IP, if you don't grant the stock early, those are missteps that you just can't afford to. It's so easy to do. It may not be intuitive. People aren't, necessarily, you don't know what you don't know, right? And that's the benefit of having folks on your team that can help guide you through who have been through it before. But in terms of, mistakes or things to avoid, I would say, and this may be added to the list of do's, but it's, a don't is the inverse. Founders often ask me, why should I put vesting restrictions on my stock? It's our company. There's two of us, there's three of us. We have equal ownership. Maybe it's not equal, but that's not the point. Say, who's going to tell me, that I can't own my stock outright? And there's some really good reasons to add vesting restrictions. Certainly when you get investors, they're going to want to make sure that everyone's, in it to win it and are going to stick it out. And if they don't want somebody walking away with 25, 30 more % of the company. That's a killer, right? So, but also just from a co-founder, group perspective, think about it. You've got, say, 4 people, you've all got, a quarter of the company. There's a falling out or somebody, gets their dream, day job opportunity and they say, I'm out. If you don't have vesting restrictions on the stock, they're going to walk away with a quarter of your company and they don't have to do anything else in the future. So investors aren't going to like that. You're not going to like that. So don't avoid putting vesting restrictions on your stock. And if you do, investors will likely force you to before they give you money. So better to go ahead and start a normal vesting period of 4 or 5 years. And then maybe when it's time to bring the investors in, you're halfway through and they say, okay, you did it right. We understand you're in your second half of vesting. We can revisit later if we need to. Another common mistake is either doling out too little or too much equity early on. You can always print more money or more shares, but of course, the more you do that, you're going to dilute yourself. And this is even before funding. So as you bring in team members, consultants, whatever, advisors, even board members, sometimes founders are a little too liberal with doling out, 2% here, 5% there, 10% there. And all of a sudden, before you know it, you're already, diluted to a point where even if you still have a majority together with the co-founders of the company, once you start bringing in outside investors and issue preferred stock, you're going to really be depressed on your percentage ownership of the company. And I said too little because if you're too stingy with doling out equity, you're not going to attract the best team members that you can. So it's that sort of balance of knowing what is enough to entice folks and what is too generous or too much of accommodation for someone coming in that you're not necessarily 100% sure is going to move the needle. So working with someone, whether again it's outside advisors or someone else on the board, they can kind of give you some anecdotal advice on what's appropriate. So unless you have plenty of cash flow, you're probably not going to be paying your very early employees or consultants in cash. So they're going to want equity, but it's striking that kind of chord of how much to give and what type of equity to give. Are you giving them restricted stock like the founders get, or are you going to issue them options, which they would have to eventually buy if they left the company?
So was that 2 or 3?
I think that was 3. Was
it 3?
We can go more.
Wait, give him one more. Give him one more. Don't.
Yeah. Okay. I would say as kind of a big one, it's a general one. Don't try to go it alone. And I'm not necessarily just talking about finding a co-founder that has a different vein of experience than you do. But in terms of bringing folks around, surrounding yourself with, folks that have more experience in this, have raised money, have sold companies, made the mistakes that you aren't going to make because you're surrounding yourself with their voices. So a lot of people kind of just put their head down, whether they're coding or they're in the lab, and it's you just get this tunnel vision on the path that you've been focusing on, and not necessarily thinking about the bigger picture or market fit or potential customer relationships, how all that's going to fit together. So I think that kind of goes with building the board or building the team, but don't be afraid to, and it doesn't even necessarily have to cost you equity or money in all cases. Get out there, network, reach out, ask the questions, don't be shy, because the more people you have sort of on your side, the less you're going to have on your plate, but also you're going to spend less sleepless nights wondering, what am I not thinking about?
Interesting. So with all this being said, one thing that I do like to do is ask if it was a startup I'm starting out, and I will just preface this by saying that Charlie has recently struck out on his own. Coming from a larger law firm, he has struck out on his own. So he is a startup as well as a provider to the community as a whole, which is, make you a double dip for this podcast.
That's right.
One thing I did want to ask, and usually if you were a startup, I'd say, what was the community ask? If you were a startup, what could the community at large do for you that would help you out?
Sure.
You being on the other side of the equation, I wanted to give you the opportunity to see if there was a community give, something that you as a service provider in the ecosystem would be able to offer the startup community that will be watching this.
Sure. And this kind of dovetails nicely with my last comment. if there's folks out there, early founders, maybe you haven't even founded a company yet, but you're wondering if you should, should it be an LLC? How much equity should I split with these guys that, I don't know that well, but they seem like they're going to add value, et cetera. I'd be happy. I'm always willing to spend, 30 minutes, cup of coffee, beer, whatever, just off the meter, off the record, no dumb questions. Happy to kind of give, a startup a checkup, sort of like a doctor visit. Here's where I am. This is what we've done. Have you signed your IP? Oh, what is that? Like, we got to do that stat, right? So stuff will come up, and it's kind of finding those gaps. So I'm happy to help out with that. Kind of be a mentor for early folks that are ready to take the plunge, or maybe you're a little deeper in and you have a question about separating from a company as a founder, or anything that kind of would touch on the stuff that we've been talking about. And then additionally, as you mentioned, I struck out on my own, I guess almost 2 years ago now. And it, like any startup, there were certainly challenges in the beginning, but it's been great. And I don't think I would ever go back. So I guess what I'm saying, if there's corporate lawyers out there, doing the work in the trenches at large or mid firms, and have the experience to get the work done, but don't necessarily feel like the demands of your practice at the firm are working for you, and want to discuss, what does it look like? How do you start? How do you find your first clients? How do you manage it? I've been through that very recently, and if somebody wants to chat with me about that, I'd be more than happy to.
Excellent. Yeah, like I said, you're coming at it from both ends. You're coming at it from the startup end, being, I think, what, 2 years?
Almost.
In. Yeah. But it's not like Charlie hasn't been doing this a while. How long have you been in the game?
I've been practicing for about 15 years.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, he went out, hung his shingle, getting after it. He knows the drill. He knows the grind. I'll ask you this, just because I like to ask this of all people who took the plunge. When did you know that it was time to do it? What was like the trigger for you where you said, okay, yeah, I'm doing this thing?
So for me, at the last firm I was at, I deliberately focused, which I hadn't really before, and it's very common for young lawyers and even, kind of mid-stage lawyers to, you've got a huge hour requirement. You've got, all things coming at you from all directions, satisfying, partners' requests, et cetera. And there really doesn't seem to be time or even, a push or encouragement from firm management or senior folks to help you get out there and start marketing. Because ultimately, people don't think of, lawyers as business people, but it is, just like a dental practice. You could be a great dentist, but if no one's sitting in the chair, that's not going to work so well. So I made it a point from kind of day one, when I made my last switch to a firm, to carve out time. I had already discussed with the folks at the firm before I joined that's something I wanted to make sure I was, had the bandwidth to do. They were very supportive, and it got easier and easier. And I actually really enjoyed that component. We've been out networking together. It doesn't necessarily come natural to everyone, but once you, kind of get out there and get comfortable with it, it can actually be a lot of fun. So I kind of went in with the idea that I was going to, give that a crack and actually, devote the time to trying to see if I could develop my own relationships. And then I guess after a year or two, I had been successful at that and developed kind of a little flock, if you will, of clients that I originated, that I had good relationships with. I was their lawyer, the firm was behind me. And I kind of started doing some math on a napkin and and figured, geesh, this could work. Talked to my family about it, my wife. It could be tough in the beginning, but this is going to give me the chance to have more flexibility about how I service clients, when I defer fees, when I give discounts, How I am going to work with the clients is up to me. And that kind of just gelled, and I figured, you know what, let's give it a go. And it's been going well.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, as it said, we're coming up right now on about 25 minutes. So I wanted to give you one last shot to, if there's anything left unsaid, anything that you wanted to present to the community, yourself, the company, whatever the case may be. If there was anything else that you wanted to make mention of, I would also, before we get into that, definitely want to reinforce the fact that if you are a startup and you're listening to this and you do want that bull session with Charlie on the cheap, 30 minutes of free advice is what it boils down to, especially if you're just getting started. And you're going to find that this world, and even if you're not just getting started, because as you said, you'll take it from the cradle right through to the finish line.
I'll help clean up the mess if needed. And I guess that's one takeaway I would say, and or a couple of points that work together. Not in a salesy way. Don't be reticent or avoid, bringing in whether it's me or somebody else. There are mistakes to be made. I mentioned a couple. There's many, and I wouldn't expect you to know those things. I don't know how to code. I wouldn't know how to hook up a Bunsen burner. But I do know how to make sure your startup is structured in the right way and organized in a fashion that when you're ready to approach investors, you're to look like you know what you're doing. Don't think that I don't need that. It's lawyers are just getting in the way or whatever, and not just lawyers. You want to make sure you're set up with a mind to how taxes are going to work. Whether you're going to raise money from outside investors, whether how you're going to approach that, you're going to need help with that, right? So, avoid again going it alone. There's a lot of stuff that you can miss, and it can be hard to go back and fix.
You know what you know. And you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the dangerous part. Well then, Charlie, I want to thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely.
If anyone's watching this and wants to get in touch with Charlie, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Email probably, Charlie with an IE at PascalAdvisory.com. And the website is PascalAdvisory.com.
And you're spelling Pascal, Pascal.
Yeah, Pascal. Sorry.
Pascal.
Yeah,
so it's Charlie, Charlie at Pascal, Pascal Advisory.
Advisory.
You know how to spell advisory. .com. And the website is PascalAdvisory.com.
PascalAdvisory.com.
Pascal, just the way I just told you how to spell it. So yeah, if you need to get a hold of Charlie, by all means do so. Tell him Nate sent you. Charlie, thanks again.
Thanks a lot. It's been great.
Take it easy.